For the past 9 winters, snow has blanketed Vernon without fail, but this year, it carried a secret the town had tried to forget. Vernon, Louisiana winter of 2016. 2 black female patrol officers, Lisa Harris and Christina Moore, vanished during a snowy night that erased every trace. They left the police station at 10:00 p.m., checked in over the radio at 10:47, and then silence. No distress call, no crash, no bodies. No one knows what happened 9 years later. As another snowstorm sweeps through, a 12-year-old boy on a camping trip stumbles over something metallic deep in the woods. It's a dented police badge, stained with candle wax, engraved with the name Officer L. Harris. But what terrified his father was that it was frozen into a stiff glove, hanging from a bare tree branch well above head height. Lisa Harris was born and raised in Vernon, a small town tucked deep within the pine forests of northern Louisiana. With a population of less than 20,000 and winters that stretched for 3 long months. Not much ever changed in Vernon, but for Lisa, this was never an easy place to live. As the first black woman to become a full-time patrol officer in the parish, she didn't just face the challenges of the jobs, he faced the quiet, persistent bias that still lingered within the local law enforcement system, even with a uniform, a badge, full training, and even a medal for bravery. Lisa was still met with suspicious looks from both colleagues and civilians, but she never let that stop her, a single mother to her 8-year-old daughter, Mia. Lisa often said she wanted her child to grow up in a community where justice meant something, and to make that happen, she had to be the first to break the silence. On her desk at the police station was a photo of the 2 of them, taken the previous winter, both smiling brightly in the snow. Lisa wore her uniform and police cap. Mia, in tiny pink gloves, wrapped her arms around her mother's neck, on duty. Lisa was quiet, focused, always taking notes. She had a habit of double-checking her dash cam every time she stepped out of the car, but everyone on the force knew she had sharp instincts. Lisa could always sense when something wasn't right before it happened. The station chief once said, she was respected for her calm, her dedication, and her no-nonsense approach to the job. But few people knew this. Lisa kept an old leather journal in the trunk of her patrol SUV, where she recorded small suspicions, things the system couldn't or wouldn't look into, in one entry. She wrote, "Something feels off around the northern woods headlights glitch. Radios cut out at night." The last person to see Lisa leave the station that night remembered her saying just one thing before getting into her car: "I'm going to check that road again." Locals saw strange lights. It sounded routine, just another part of her shift. But 9 years later, those words would become the last she ever spoke. No one imagined that a routine patrol on a snowy night would be the last time anyone saw a mother, an officer, a daughter of the community before she disappeared without a trace. Christina Moore was nothing like Lisa not because she was any less brave, but because she carried a completely different kind of energy. Christina was born in Mississippi, but moved to Vernon at age 15 to live with her grandmother. After losing her mother, a frontline nurse, to a sudden stroke, she grew up in an old wooden house on the edge of town, surrounded by tall maple trees and the warmth of a kitchen fire that never went out during winter. Her grandmother was the first in the family to vote, and taught her, serving your community isn't a title, it's a choice you make every day, with her lively, funny personality. Christina was the one who made people laugh on cold night shifts. She wrote poetry, loved photography, and had enrolled in a distance course on criminal psychology in her free time. She'd wander through the woods alone, snapping photos for a project she called Cops and Snow, a collection that was once featured in the town hall during the Christmas season. One of the most well-known shots showed her and Lisa standing by their patrol car, both smiling, gloves raised, with snow-covered pines behind them. Christina once told a fellow officer, "I'm not here to be a hero. I just want somebody else's daughter to make it home safe." That soft-spoken line captured her inner world, someone who felt deeply responsible for the pain of others. On her record, she had once rescued a lost girl in the forest during winter, guided only by a clue, a red knit hat snagged on a low branch. Since then, A red beanie became Christina's lucky charm. She always kept one in her car trunk, just in case there's another kid who needs to see red in all that white. The bond between Lisa and Christina went far beyond work. They were opposites, but perfectly in sync. One was strict, the other gentle, one quiet, the other always storytelling. They shared midnight meals after shifts, stood up together against workplace discrimination, and co-signed a petition to improve lighting along the northern patrol routes. They used to joke, if we ever went missing in this town, it'd take a whole week before anyone noticed. No one thought that joke would ever become a prophecy. On the night of December 14th, 2016, Vernon was bracing for its strongest snowstorm of the year. Schools closed early, families boarded up windows. On local radio, police urged everyone to stay inside unless absolutely necessary. But for Lisa and Christina, it was just another patrol working the 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. shift. They left in their usual police SUV with a thermos of hot coffee in the cup holder, the heater on low, and a list of checkpoints along the northern roads. Before leaving, Christina sent her grandmother a simple message. On patrol. The snow's beautiful. Lisa kissed her sleeping daughter on the forehead and whispered, "It'll be back before you wake up." Small, ordinary moments, but they would be the last time either woman connected with the outside world. No messages, no calls, nothing. Except a final radio transmission logged at 10:47 p.m. Christina's voice. Calm, checking the old East checkpoint flashing lights. That patrol shift, meant to be just another night in the snow, became a mystery that's gone unanswered for nearly a decade. All they left behind was a frozen police vehicle on the side of a forest road. No people, no struggle, no blood. But also, no sign they'd left willingly. Their wallets, phones, and personal bags were all still in the car. Lisa's gloves were still on the driver's seat. Christina's red beanie gone. In the years since their disappearance, Vernon slowly adjusted to silence. The investigation stalled. The media moved on. Those once close to Lisa and Christina left the force or the town altogether. At the police station, their photos still hang behind a pane of cloudy glass under the words "missing" in the line of duty. But for their families and the few who still hold on to hope, the question remains, where did they go that snowy night, and why? After all these years, has not a single trace been found. On the morning of December 15th, 2016, the night shift coordinator at the Vernon Police Department was reviewing the communication logs when he noticed something unusual. There was a long gap without any check-ins from Patrol Unit 4 Lisa and Christina's team. Their radio had gone silent at exactly 10:47 p.m. the night before. At first, it was assumed they were somewhere deep in the woods, where radio signals often cut out. But by 3 a.m., when the shift change came and they still hadn't returned or checked in, the supervisor began to worry. A search team was sent to retrace the route their patrol car should have taken. The snowstorm was still raging. Wind gusts lashed through the trees, cutting visibility down to less than 20 meters, around 6 a.m. The patrol SUV was found parked on the side of the road near the Old North checkpoint, a site long abandoned, no longer part of any official patrol route, and left off current maps. The first strange thing, there was no sign of an accident, no skid marks, no impact, no evidence of a struggle or a forced stop. The vehicle wasn't locked. The interior light was still on. The keys were still in the ignition, inside. Lisa and Christina were nowhere to be found, but all their personal items were untouched: wallets, phones, spare uniforms, snacks. Even 2 coffee cups, sewn of which was still slightly warm, on the passenger seat. There was something that made the commanding officer pause for a long time, a red knit hat, damp and dusted with snow, sitting there with no explanation. It wasn't on the list of gear either woman had brought. It didn't belong to Christina. It didn't belong to Lisa. So how did it get there in the middle of a storm, on a night cold enough to freeze skin in minutes? No blood, no signs of struggle, no footprints to follow. The snow had erased it all. The snow didn't just cover the scene, it smothered it like a suffocating white blanket. Every sound was muffled. Every theory felt thin, and that's what made the disappearance so chilling if they were attacked. Who did it so quickly and cleanly that not a trace remained? And if they left voluntarily, why would they abandon everything, including their phones? The area was locked down for 72 hours. Search and rescue teams, K9 units, even helicopters equipped with thermal imaging were deployed, but nothing turned up. No heat signatures, no scent trails, no signs of life. The investigators issued a preliminary finding, missing in the line of duty, though they didn't rule out the possibility of disorientation due to extreme weather. But both women were locals, familiar with the terrain. Lisa, in particular, had GPS logs marking every stop, and the final location in that data was the abandoned checkpoint, the same place where their signals went dead by the third week after the disappearance. The investigation was officially suspended. The reason given, no new leads, and weather conditions pose a safety risk to rescue teams. Lisa and Christina's families were never consulted. They received only a short letter. The department will continue monitoring for new developments. For some, that was the end. For others, it was a betrayal. A few weeks later, their personal effects were returned. Lisa's mother spent the whole afternoon going through them one by one. A purple pen her daughter's favorite for writing reports, a coffee thermos with a faint lipstick stain, and something that stunned the entire family, Mia's handmade scarf. Lisa's daughter's was still in the car. She always kept it as a good luck charm. It still smelled faintly of fabric softener, though the fibers were now stiff from frost. No one could understand why she would have left it behind if she had chosen to leave, to them. It was a silent message. Lisa didn't walk away. She was taken. National media barely touched the story. One regional station ran a brief segment titled "2 Officers Possibly Lost in Winter Storm." No investigation, no deep dive, no questions asked. The silence stretched on like snow cover pure white, but cold to the bone. In a closed-door press briefing, a police spokesperson said, "We cannot rule out that they became disoriented in the storm or suffered an accident." But when asked why the radio, GPS, and dash cam all stopped working within the same 3-minute window, no one had an answer. Only Sergeant Angela Price continued the search in her own way. She archived every satellite image, mapped every route, tracked every tiny anomaly from strange lights reported that night to anonymous calls recorded at a border relay station. In a personal note, she wrote, "I don't believe they died that night. I believe they tried to send a signal. And I believe someone saw it, but stayed quiet." By the end of 2017, Angela filed a formal request to reopen the case. It was denied due to lack of new evidence. She received a short email. "Thank you for your concern. The case has been closed according to protocol." The message didn't mention Lisa. It didn't mention Christina. Not a single word. As if they'd never existed. And maybe that's what haunts those left behind most of all, not just the storm, but the silence that followed, because sometimes what truly erases a person isn't the snow. It's the way the world chooses to forget them. 9 years after Lisa and Christina vanished, just when it seemed the case had faded into oblivion, an unexpected discovery reignited old memories and deep suspicion. It happened in early winter of 2025 as snow began to fall thick across the Vernon woods. A 12-year-old boy named Malik was camping with his father, Jamal Washington, near the northern Forest Stand area locals once called Blizzard Trail, while playing near an old tree. Malik tripped on something hard and slick beneath the snow. He knelt down, brushed the snow aside, and uncovered a gleaming piece of metal glinting under the pale sunlight. It was a police badge bent, with cracked edges, as if it had taken a hard impact. But what sent a chill down Jamal's spine was how it was affixed to a frozen glove hanging from a leafless tree branch, right at eye level. The glove wasn't caught by the wind. It looked deliberately placed. On the back of the badge was an engraving Officer L. Harris. They contacted police immediately. The area was sealed off within 24 hours, and forensics teams were brought in, for the first time in nearly a decade. Lisa Harris' name returned to the evening news, but instead of bringing answers, the discovery only deepened the mystery. Authorities confirmed it was indeed Lisa's original badge, officially listed as missing with the officer, but no one could explain why it turned up nearly 3 miles away from the last known location, deep in a part of the woods that had never been thoroughly searched. Preliminary tests revealed the glove had no clear DNA, but was coated in traces of old candle wax, something Lisa never carried on patrol. In the forest, in the snow, who would need a candle? Further analysis detected scents of cinnamon and lavender, the kind often used in handmade candles. Theories quickly began to swirl. The badge didn't just fall there. Someone had kept it, and now someone had returned it like a message. The media took notice. True crime forums buzzed again, labeling the case one of the coldest mysteries under snow. New questions surfaced if Lisa's badge appeared. What about Christina? And could someone else have visited the scene, someone who never spoke up? Then, a call came in that no one expected. It was to Sergeant Angela Price, Lisa's longtime friend. The caller was retired officer Terry Brooks. Terry Brooks had served over 25 years with the Vernon Police Department before retiring in 2019. He was never one for the spotlight, and during the original 2016 investigation, he remained mostly silent. But when he heard about Lisa's badge being found, something compelled him to speak in a nearly hour-long phone call with Angela. Terry recalled an old case he'd handled back in 1998 about a young black couple who went missing in the Vernon woods, not far from where the badge was just recovered. That case never made it to the papers. He said slowly, "We didn't have enough evidence to pursue it," and their family moved away a few months later. But one detail stuck with him. The internal report had mentioned an abandoned cabin deep in the forest, once used by migrants seeking shelter in the winter. At the time, it was snow-covered, chained shut with rusted links, but inside were signs someone had been living there. Small footprints, cigarette butts, a burned-down candle. Angela immediately pulled up maps of the area and realized the cabin Terry spoke of hadn't appeared on any patrol maps since 2000. Satellite images showed the spot now completely overgrown, hidden beneath forest canopy and thick with vines. It was virtually forgotten, except by those who had lived in Vernon for decades. Angela and a new investigative team organized a field survey, tracing the location based on Terry's memory. They hiked through the forest for nearly 3 hours, using metal detectors and old topographic maps to guide them. And then they found it. The cabin lay buried in the woods, cloaked in vines and snow. One corner of the roof had collapsed. The front door hung slightly ajar, as if untouched for years. No signs of recent activity, but the air around it felt unnaturally cold, as if something still lingered. They stepped inside. Every footfall sank into the dust and ice. The floorboards creaked. Flashlights swept across peeling walls, and then they saw it. A worn wooden chair, with rope marks still etched into the armrests. A torn blanket, neatly folded in the corner. On a table, an old metal box, cold to the touch, rusted at the hinges. Inside, 2 police badges, one marked Lisa Harris, the other Christina Moore. Next to them, a blood-stained scarf, draped over the back of a chair, as if left behind in haste. No bodies, no sign of life, but clearly, someone had been there, or held there. They spent hours gathering every piece of evidence from the cabin. The space, small and damp, felt harmless at first glance, but hid disturbing clues. On the east wall were faint scratch marks, not carved with a knife, but scraped as if by metal. They formed grouped tallies, 5 lines, then another 5, again and again. Angela counted 26 sets in total, some faded, but still legible. Someone had been marking time 1 day at a time in silence, a sign that the confinement may have lasted nearly a month. In a corner, behind a tattered curtain, they found a stack of wet, shredded papers, possibly part of a notebook or handwritten letter. Most were illegible, but one line, barely intact, left the team speechless. "If no one comes before the snow melts, know that we tried." No name, no date, just ink, blurred like a whisper of desperation. It didn't feel like a goodbye, it felt like a message for the future, for someone who still remembered them. The final piece of evidence seemed small, almost trivial, but made Angela stop in her tracks. A single button, embossed with a star. It wasn't from a police uniform. It matched the kind sewn onto children's coats. When she picked it up, a memory hit her. the child-sized red knit cap found in the patrol car years ago. Unclaimed, no one ever figured out who it belonged to. That button might have once been part of it. The unspoken question returned. Why was there a child's item in the cabin where 2 officers were allegedly held? Angela began reviewing everything. Terry Brooks's 1998 case. Scattered reports of strange lights in the woods over the years. A pattern began to emerge. All disappearances happened in winter in the northern Vernon forest, near the abandoned checkpoint and the cabin. Witnesses described flashing lights, low rumbling sounds, and a sense that something changed, places where radios glitched and watches stopped. The deeper Angela looked, the clearer it became this wasn't just about Lisa and Christina. This was part of something far bigger, a string of silent disappearances spanning decades, never truly investigated. The cabin wasn't just a scene. It was a waypoint, a blind spot, a place someone once used, then abandoned without a name, without a trace. And now, somehow, the pieces were resurfacing, small things, a glove, a candle, a rusted badge telling a story no one dared to speak. Angela looked out toward the forest, where pine trees stood frozen like statues in the winter wind. Something happened out there. Not once, not by chance. And this time, the evidence wasn't buried beneath the snow anymore. As news of the abandoned cabin and the new evidence spread, an independent investigation began to take shape by a group of investigative journalists and retired officers working voluntarily. Angela Price became the central link. But this time, she wasn't alone. One of the first to reach out was Reggie Samuels, a black journalist based in Baton Rouge. Known for his deep reporting on overlooked disappearances in communities of color, Reggie brought something the Vernon police had never had: a witness file from 2011 documenting the testimony of a woman who once lived near the Vernon woods. Her name was Edna Watkins, now in her 80s, living in a care home in Monroe. In that interview, Edna described seeing strange lights and figures entering the northern woods for years, especially in winter. She recalled a tall man in a long gray coat, always at dusk with a flashlight that didn't shine. She insisted he wasn't a local, but every winter, he'd appear near the old checkpoint. At the time, her testimony wasn't considered credible due to a history of mild confusion. Reggie wasn't satisfied with that dismissal. He dug deeper and found that in 2016, the very night Lisa and Christina vanished, a strange vehicle had triggered a speed sensor on Highway 171 about 7 miles from the scene. The license plate didn't match any registered to Vernon residents. Through a string of background queries, the vehicle was traced to a man named Clark Ellison, who lived 60 miles away in a town called Dry Creek. Clark had once worked security for a cold storage transport company. Notably, his employment file showed he had been investigated internally for unauthorized access to restricted areas, but there wasn't enough evidence to fire him. When Reggie visited Clark's old home, he learned it had been sold in 2017, the new owners said. When we moved in, there were some weird things in the garage and burned candles, an old map with Vernon circled, and a long gray coat that still smelled like essential oils. There was no direct evidence. But for the first time since the disappearance, there was a name, a man whose actions, location, and possessions aligned eerily with the case. Questions emerged. Why did Clark Ellison have a map of the Vernon forest? Why were candles and a coat matching Edna's description found in his garage? And why was his vehicle seen near the scene on the night Lisa and Christina vanished? Public attention surged in Vernon for the first time in nearly a decade. Social media filled with posts sharing photos of Lisa and Christina, tagged joshing justice for Lisa and Christina. Some posts referred to Clark as a long-ignored suspect, putting pressure on the parish sheriff's office to act. But instead of launching a new inquiry, they released a short statement. There is insufficient evidence to reopen the case. These new leads are unverified and do not indicate criminal activity. Angela was not satisfied. She began re-examining the original investigation files, especially the entry logs from the area the night of the disappearance. There, she uncovered a detail omitted from public reports on the night Lisa and Christina vanished. A traffic camera had recorded a large white truck stopped on the highway near the old checkpoint from 10:53 p.m. to 10:59 p.m. That was just 2 minutes after the patrol car's GPS signal ended at 10:51. What happened in that narrow window? Angela retrieved the footage, and noticed a faint marking on the truck door, 3 faded letters in black paint, CTF. She sent the image to Reggie, who quickly cross-referenced it with internal files from the company Clark once worked for, Cold Trail Freight Lines. The initials matched. That company's vehicle was at the scene at the time Lisa and Christina vanished. Everything began to connect. But the bigger question lingered if Clark was involved. Why wasn't he investigated in 2016? Reggie found the answer in a leaked audio recording from a years-old internal police meeting. In it, a senior officer was heard saying, "This isn't the time to stir things up. 2 women, snowstorm, forest, no clear evidence. No one wants another unsolvable case on the books." That line cut deep, because they were women, because they were black, because no camera caught it. This was a risk, deemed easier to forget. Angela shared the recording with the media. Outrage erupted. For many, this wasn't just a missing persons case. It had become a symbol of invisibility, a reminder that while some disappearances made headlines, others, uniformed, serving their communities, could vanish with barely a ripple of effort to find them. Clark Ellison, by then, had not been questioned. He'd left the state in 2021 with no forwarding address. The last confirmed sighting placed him in northern Idaho, near the Canadian border. But one thing Angela couldn't shake: if Clark was involved, he hadn't acted alone. The cabin showed signs of long-term use. Multiple handprints of varying sizes marked the walls. At least 2 people had used that place as a holding site. And if they had once held Lisa and Christina, who's to say they hadn't held others after the Clark Ellison lead went public? New questions emerged, ones no one had dared ask before. A group called the Southwatch Collective, a grassroots research team focused on unresolved Southern disappearance, contacted Angela with a private database they'd been compiling for nearly a decade. It listed 27 people, mostly black women who had vanished in or near rural woodlands across Louisiana, Texas, and Mississippi over the last 20 years. The patterns were chilling winter disappearances, little to no physical evidence, and no sustained investigation. At least 3 of those cases bore disturbing similarities to Lisa and Christina's. One involved Arlene T., who disappeared in 2009 near the Texas-Louisiana border. She was said to have gotten lost in the woods driving home. Her car was found intact on the roadside. No damage. Doors open, personal items untouched, and in the trunken, unlit, lavender-scented candle, back then, no one thought it mattered. Know It felt like another thread in a web. Another case, Denise R., a Monroe schoolteacher, vanished in 2013. Officials said she may have walked away from her job due to stress, but her sister insisted Denise had no such plans. In fact, she had told a friend, "Someone waits near the school lot at dusk. He never speaks." Before she disappeared, she sent one last text. "If I don't come home tonight, check my desk drawer." Inside was a torn map marking northern woods near Vernon. Angela's hands trembled as she laid out the file-spinning disappearance sites, logging strange clues, candles, red hats, long gray coats, camera blackouts. A picture began to form. This wasn't random. It was a pattern, a system, deliberate, organized, and perhaps most terrifying, almost no one had ever been investigated. Angela brought her findings to the local news. At first, no one wanted to air it, but when Reggie Samuels agreed to produce a special report, the story was broadcast and the exact 9-year anniversary of Lisa and Christina's disappearance. They didn't use the word suspect. They just asked, if someone is choosing victims, why them? And why is it so easy for the world to look away that night? A woman called the station anonymous, her voice hoarse but clear. "I know that gray coat. I saw it. Winter of 2017, near my mother's house in Dry Creek. The man, he wasn't alone. There was always someone else. Quieter, younger." Angela had never felt fear like that, because if that voice was telling the truth, Clark hadn't acted alone. And if there was a second person, was he still out there, waiting for the next winter 1 week after Reggie Samuels's documentary aired? His inbox overflowed. Most of the messages were words of support, shared memories, or new leads related to other overlooked missing persons cases. But one message stopped the entire investigation team in their tracks. It came from a former technician who had worked at Vernon's Emergency Dispatch Center in 2016. The message read simply, "You should listen to the 911 tapes from the night of December 14th, 2016. There was more than one call. Reggie and Angela immediately filed a request to access the recordings. At first, they were denied. The official reason audio files were corrupted due to a system storage failure, but through a trusted source. They obtained a backup, owned that had never been made public. Inside were not just the known 4-second call from 3:12 a.m., but two others, both flagged as unverified source, one at 1:03 a.m., lasting 8 seconds, another at 1:48 a.m., lasting nearly 30 seconds in the 1:48 call. A woman's voice whispered, "Someone's here, they won't let us leave. Please come." Then static. The voice was analyzed and almost certainly belonged to Christina. If the data was real, it meant Lisa and Christina didn't vanish immediately. They were alive for hours. They tried to call for help, but those calls were never routed to first responders, never flagged as emergencies. No one came. When Angela questioned the dispatch center, a former employee admitted, "We were slammed with storm-related calls. The system was overloaded. Calls without clear locations got automatically deprioritized." The excuse sounded like a shrug, like technical failure had left two women behind. Angela was furious. She looked back at the entire case, every blocked request to reopen the file, every ignored witness report, every time someone said not enough evidence. Every delay was a silent cut. This wasn't about a lack of leads. It was a lack of belief that their lives were worth fighting for. And now, a deeper question began to surface. Had someone inside the system deliberately slowed, concealed, or dismissed evidence? No one could say for sure, but no one could deny if Lisa and Christina had been someone else, seen as more deserving victims in the public's eyes, they might have been saved. When news of the neglected 911 calls broke, a wave of outrage swept through the community. This wasn't just anger, it was betrayal. People who once trusted the system to protect them were left asking, if even two officers' women who served and wore the badge couldn't get help when they needed it most, then who can at a town hall gathering held at a local church? Christina's grandmother, now frail, in a wheelchair, was invited to speak. She said only one sentence, but it froze the room. They didn't disappear. They were allowed to disappear. No one responded, because deep down, everyone knew she was right. From the small things, a child's hat in the car, an old map in Clark Ellison's garage, to the decisions not to act on distress calls. Everything pointed to a painful truth. This wasn't just a personal tragedy. It was a collective failure. While reviewing old records, Angela found something that stunned her. 3 days after Lisa and Christina vanished, the FBI had submitted a request to access the police department's internal communication system. The parish sheriff's office denied it. Reason given: insufficient evidence to justify need. Angela brought that document to Reggie's studio. When it aired, they didn't have to say a word. Just showing the Linnean screen was enough. The silence from viewers said the rest. And then, just as it all seemed to point back to Clark Ellison, everything changed while tracing his old cell phone signals. Southwatch researchers uncovered something devastating. Clark had actually been in custody that night, arrested for a minor offense in a town over 200 miles from Vernon. They confirmed the arrest record, the bail paperwork, and even the timestamp. Clark had been in Vernonese, but not on the night Lisa and Christina disappeared. The entire theory collapsed, and the realization was more jarring than ever. If not Clark, then who? If every theory so far had led to a dead end, what did the remaining evidence mean? The scratch marks on the cabin walls, the frozen glove in the tree, the watch. Stopped at 3:12. They were still there, still whispering truths, but no one could say what those truths were. Angela stood before the investigation board, tracing the lines between victims, sightings, and places. Every thread led back to Vernon's woods. Every thread led back to a night of snow, but the final thread was still cut. Faith was shaken. Truth shattered. And hope, if it still lived, was no longer in the theories. It lived in the community itself. Would they dare keep asking? Even if no answer ever came, the 9th winter since Lisa Harris and Christina Moore disappeared had come, once again. Snow blanketed the town of Vernon, but this time, the snow didn't just carry the cold. It carried memory, a reminder, a sign of something long left unnamed. The town held a quiet memorial in the central square, beside a stone honoring officers lost in the line of duty. Lisa and Christina's names weren't etched there. They never were, because they had never been officially declared dead. But to those gathered, they had long been symbols not of death, but of resilience and erasure. Each person brought something small: a candle, a wool scarf, or a faded photo of the two women smiling in the snow. Among them stood Mia, Lisa's daughter. Now 17. She stood silently, holding a letter her mother had written back in 2014 after being named Officer of the Quarter. The letter wasn't addressed to anyone. It read only to myself in a future that may blur in it. Lisa wrote, "If one day I don't come back, please don't reduce my story to a headline. I am a mother, a daughter, a protector of this community. I am not perfect, but I lived by what I believed, that justice isn't just the law, it's how we treat each other, even when no one's watching." Mia read the letter aloud at the memorial. No tears, no theatrics, just a steady, calm voice that held everyone still. When she finished, she said nothing more. She placed a candle on the stone steps, lit it with her mother's old lighter, then stepped back into the crowd. That night, candles flickered in the snow, and something in Vernon shifted. Maybe it was awareness, maybe reckoning, but it was no longer silence. Angela stood at a distance, watching the light gather. She knew the case remained unsolved, the questions unanswered, but finally, truth was beginning to carve out a space for itself. However small, in the whiteness of winter, the next morning, snow continued to fall, but Vernon seemed to slow down, if only for a beat. In that thick, frozen air, people began telling stories again, not in whispers, not with hesitation. Stories of Lisa guiding a line of school kids across the street in the rain, uniform soaked, but still smiling. Of Christina pulling over mid-patrol just to help an elderly woman retrieve groceries spilled on icy pavement. The stories spread beyond Vernon. On social media, clips of Mia's speech and photos of the forest cabin went viral. People stopped asking what happened and started asking, why didn't we see it sooner? State lawmakers began proposing reforms to emergency response protocols, ensuring that no 911 call, no matter how brief or anonymous, would be dismissed again. National papers started referring to this as the Vernon effect, where a single disappearance sparked a broader conversation about justice, trust, and who gets to be seen. Then, a few days after the memorial, a forestry worker surveying the eastern edge of the forest, where the snow was beginning to thaw, found something beneath the base of a pine. A woman's wristwatch, cracked face, hands stopped at 3 to 12 on the back. It read, "For my warrior." Mom always. Lisa's watch, long believed lost. It didn't hold legal weight, but its symbolism was undeniable. Angela held it gently in her hand as if, after everything. Lisa was still speaking, telling her time may stop in a moment of terror, but memory does not. And just as say no matter how late still needs someone to finish the road, the town didn't build a statue. They placed a small wooden marker at the edge of the forest, right where the watch was found. It bore no names, no dates, only a line. They tried to send a signal. Now it's our turn. Wind passed through the trees, brushing the last snow off the sign, and in the soft earth beneath it. Someone noticed faint footprints, sold, but real, as if the past had never truly disappeared, only waited for someone to listen. It began with a dented badge, coated in candle wax, hanging from a tree in the dead of winter. And now, the story has carried us farther than anyone could have imagined. From a silent disappearance to scattered fragments across the American South. From two forgotten women to calls that were never heard. From silence to conversation. From loss to the return of memory. But this story isn't truly over, because out there, more files remain unopened, more fragments have yet to be connected, more families still wait for a call, a sign, a truth. Maybe you've heard of a case that never made the news, a name you can't forget, a witness no one ever asked. Among all the stories still out there, what do you want to hear next? a missing person lost to time, someone who came back but not the same, or a trace that links two cases thought to be unconnected. Whatever it is, well, keep listening. Because one truth remains, the missing were never gone. They are still here in memory, in the fight for justice, and sometimes in a watch, frozen in time, beneath the winter snow.